Alright, everybody, welcome to the Math Hive, where it is my goal and passion to teach you a range of topics in the field of math. And viewers, thank you for watching the first video on this channel. Before I get into today's topic, I just want to talk about the method that I use in the Hive, specifically fundamental understanding. You get fundamental understanding from knowing how concepts were developed, coming up with our own concepts, and knowing why and how we apply math concepts. If you can do those three things, you have fundamental understanding. Now, to get into the topic, we're going to be talking about the circle equation. So, the circle equation is one that we use to graph circles, and it can be a bit confusing at first with all the letters that you see in the equation. It's almost like there's no numbers at all. So we see this equation, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. But we may not have any idea what any of these terms mean. We just know that this was some sort of displacement, this is our radius, but we can't really put it into context, and we have no idea how the formula was even created. Okay, so what I've done here is poorly attempt to draw a circle and a graph. But we're going to try and dissect the circle to even understand our equation here. So, at any point in the circle, we have the center, and that distance to the outer side is the radius. We know this. We know radius. We can use this for area. We can use this for circumference and many things about the circle. Any point from the center directly to the outside is the radius. We know that to be true. But where does all this x minus h, y minus k, why are we squaring these, why are we squaring the radius, what does this even mean? How does this equation create this circle? So I want you to think about this triangle I drew here, and we're going to call this side C. If I asked you to find the length of C, how would you do it? Well, some of you might say we could figure out this angle here, and if we knew either one of these sides, we could use some trig. There are many ways to go about it, but the one thing that people are going to use, a very standard formula you probably learned a while ago, was using these two sides, A and B. And we know with Pythagorean's theorem, this is true. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. This is one way we could find C, and this is actually the way they used, whoever made this equation, to come up with this formula right here. And that's how we're able to create this circle. And I know it's triangles and circles. It doesn't seem like that yet, but I'm going to show you how. So I've made a circle, and I've made it a little bit bigger. And we're going to draw a radius on this circle from the center. We're going to call this radius r. So if I asked you how to find this radius, and you were basing it off of Pythagorean's theorem, how would you even think about doing that? Well, the way I see it is that we actually have a triangle. If we somehow knew this side, and we somehow knew this side, well, we could find the radius, right? We would just use Pythagorean's theorem, and we could find the radius if we just knew this side and this side. But in what scenario would you even know the length of this side and the length of that side right here? Where would you know these two lengths in order to find the radius? You would probably be given the area or something like that to find the radius, right? But in a graph, you do know these two sides. So once again, I have put this circle in a graph. Now if I asked you how to figure out this radius here, well, how would you do that? Well, you know this side is 3 ticks long. And you know that this side is approximately 4 ticks high. Excuse my drawing. Now, I could ask you how to find the radius, and you would just use Pythagorean's theorem. and you would know that the radius is equal to 5. So we're doing all this. How does that relate to this equation? Well, think about it this way. The circle is centered around the middle. The center is on the origin 0, 0. So how did you figure out that this side was 3? Well, you know that this point right here is 3, and this point right here is 0, so this length was 3. You know that this point right here is 4, and this point right here is 0, so you know that this side length is 4. And then you added them up, you squared it, and then you got your radius squared. So now I'm going to use our axes, and we know that this is the x-axis, and this is the y-axis, and I'm going to rewrite this formula right here. So if our circle is in this middle right here, well, we can just use this x point, and we can use this y point, square them, and we get our radius squared. So now you're starting to see it looks a little bit more like this formula. But the question is, why did they put this minus h? Why did they put this minus k? I mean, where are these letters even coming from? So I've drawn a new circle here, and its center is right here. So we're going to do the same thing again, and we're going to try and solve for this radius here. So we're going to do the same thing. We want to figure out what this side and this side are equal to. Okay, well, our x value, it's not, well, we could say this is approximately like 3.5, but we don't plug 3.5 into our equation because that's not our length. Our length is whatever this x value is minus this value, right? We got to find the distance between these two. So whatever this point is, we could call it h. So we know that if we want to find this distance, we got to subtract the x value of this point from the x value of this point, which we're calling h. And we know that if we do that, we'll get this distance right here, and we can plug this into our Pythagorean theorem. So that's the first part. Same thing with our y. We know our y value here, and whatever the y value of this point is, we'll just call it k. In this scenario, it happens to be 0, but if it was all the way up here, you wouldn't just take the y value, you'd want to find the distance. You would do that by taking this y value and subtracting it from this y value, which is k. That's how you find the distance. And we know that if we take this distance and we plug in Pythagorean's theorem, we can find our radius. And then of course, this all equals r squared. And that is how we get this equation up here. So now, let's check for fundamental understanding. Do we even know what this formula means? Well, yeah, we do. What the graph is doing is it's saying we're going to find a distance from this point to this point, or from this point to this point. But what we do know is that in order to find this distance, we gotta subtract the x value from this point from the x value from this point to get whatever this value is right here. And then to get this value right here, we gotta subtract the y value from this point and the y value from this point. Once we know those two values, we can use Pythagorean's theorem, and we can square them, and we know that it should equal the radius squared. And so what your graph is doing is whenever you plug in, say, x minus 2 squared plus y minus 1 squared, and you say that's equal to 4, well, it's finding all the points that make this up. So for instance, this point right here, it's going to have a radius of 2 because we know it's equal to r squared. And it's saying, well, we're going to take the x value here, subtract it from this, and take the y value here and subtract it from this. And we square it and we should get 2. In that case, it's a valid point and we mark it. Any one of these triangles is going to have a radius of 2. Because even though the x and the y values are different, when you square them and add them up, you still get 4. It's still Pythagorean's theorem because the radius is the same everywhere. So that's what this equation is doing. First, it's finding this distance here, then it's finding this distance here, and it's using Pythagorean's theorem to find the radius. And so that's why they also say that h and k are your center. That's just saying we're going to subtract the outer edge of the circle from the middle to find these two lengths, and we're going to square it. So that means every point on this circle is a solution to the equation. All of these work. Pythagorean's theorem is going to be used and we're going to get the same radius because that's how a circle works. So now that we know how this formula was made, I hope this guy will help you better understand the questions that they're going to ask you on the SAT, now that you know what each component of these is actually doing and how they came up with the equation. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comments, and if you have any feedback or videos that you would like to see, please do let me know. Thank you for watching.